Contrapposto is the way that the figure always stands to balance the weight. You'll always find that the shoulders and the hips will go in opposite directions of each other. Here's her head. Here we've got a beautiful line of action. Look at that. Look at that line of action. Is that just beautiful or what? I mean, she's just this is very graceful, very elegant, and I'm a sucker for graceful, elegant images. Alright, and her head is actually more centered this way on that line of action. I usually think of the spine as the line of action. And then we've got shoulders going this way, and we've got hips going this way. So opposite, and there's a good line of balance from her head to her foot, which is in the front a little bit. So then I'm going to put some curving. Go ahead, and when you're doing like your line drawings, remember to give them a little bit of curve, because the body isn't really made of sticks. It's really rather curvy in all kinds of ways. Do a little curving action there. Then I'm going to give her a chest, rib cage. Now, here's what's a cool thing. The arms raise the way that the structure of the shoulders goes. The clavicles will raise, and the scapula, which you can't see, swings out like almost like a counterbalance on the back. So we've got that. That's why we get this look of the arms going up. And we'll put in some hips here. Got one leg. I'm trying to scale back a little bit. I think I'm going to go off my paper if I don't scale it back. This is a very good reason for sketching your drawings out in advance, very lightly, so that if you have to go back and make some adjustment, it's not like a huge mess. So what I'm going to do is make her head a little smaller. Since the body's proportions is based on the head size, I found I needed to draw the body a little bit smaller, so I need to go back and make the head a little smaller so that she's in proportion and doesn't have a monster head. So now I can bring this in a little bit, so I want her to stay on the page here. Okay, so here I've broken up the figure into components. Make sure you can't see the feet, but they're there. They're the feet. Make sure you give the feet and the hands plenty of room to be. Sometimes they come out as being too small. It's easier to make them a little smaller, I think, than to make them a little bigger. And for every section of the figure, you should be, for every bone really, you should be making a separate unit. Don't draw all around in one solid contour. You guys probably all know that already, but I've been seeing a lot of drawings lately that have been done that way, and it just destroys the depth in the drawing. It makes it flatten out and become very unattractive. Okay, so now I've got her basically sketched out. I'm going to take a closer look at the negative spaces and the silhouette and triangulation of where things are in relationship to each other. So now her elbow, here's start right here with her head, and her eyes are like this. Her elbow is actually more in line with her hairline. So I've got her arm too high, too long, this part of her arm too long, so I can take that down. It's not a worry, and I'm not committed to it, so I can just bring it down a little bit without too much trouble. That's a little better. Let's check her other elbow from her head. I think we'll do the same thing. Bring it in just a little bit. Okay. Now, she's got this great line that's coming from her arm here to her waist and then out again at her hip. And I want to make sure that I'm going to get that. There's this line. Where does her hip line up? Where does her hip? Where does her elbow? Her elbow definitely extends out past the figure, so we've got that. Other elbow also, if you drop a line straight down, extends out past the figure. So we've kind of got her blocked in, which is helpful. And then we can see this negative space. And her hip is thrust out more than I had originally drawn it, so I'm going to thrust that out a little bit more. And bring in the inner thigh a little bit. And check where the knee goes. The funny thing about hips, when you draw hips, here's the hard part in my world about the hips, is that, as we know, the hip pelvis goes something like this, and there's the coccyx there, and there's an opening there, and it joins in the front, and then in this part is where the hip bones are. The hip bone and is the femur has a head on it that's sideways, and then it folds down from there. And so when the person's pushing out their hip like this, you're getting two marks. And it's not just, well, yeah, women carry a little extra fat down there, but what you're getting is the hip, top of the iliac crest, which is this hip here, and then the secondary line is where the great trochanter, which is the curved end, or the pointed, the elbow end of the femur, is called the great trochanter, and all of these muscles and tendons attach to the great trochanter, so it always tucks in there. If you see people that are really, really well built, you'll see that they have a little depression. If they're in good shape, they have a little depression right there. So that kind of explains how that hip works. Then if you take it, make sure that you've got it at the right angle. Her belly's going to overlap here, and her hip, other hip just barely shows right around the corner. And her leg is twisted slightly, so that you're seeing almost a side angle of her lower leg and her hip. It's really kind of cool. Yeah, so it could be, sometimes it's harder to draw heavier people, and sometimes it's easier. It depends on how their weight is distributed. If they kind of have their weight distributed all over, they can look kind of roly-poly, and it can actually be kind of fun. If their weight distributes kind of oddly, like, for instance, well, like Dave was saying, men gain their weight around their midsection, women tend to gain weight around their around their hips and legs. Sometimes that happens in reverse, and the men actually get pear-shaped and the women get apple-shaped. And that makes it hard to draw because it's not what you would expect, I think, personally. My own personal little opinion.
Yeah, but I was told that was rare. It happens that way.
It's more rare that men... Yeah, it's more rare that men are pear-shaped, but I have seen pear-shaped men. It's not that uncommon for women to have a belly, have no waistline, and have no butt, and have a belly. I've seen that. My sister is an example. She has no butt. No butt. She's wonderful. She doesn't have a butt. I got the butt in the family. I got extra to make up for it. So. All right, so I've done breaking down my figure. I've given it some contours. I'm going to now look for lights and darks. It's lit a little bit too much from both sides, so I'm going to have to choose which side I want to be more dominant for the light. So I'm going to give this yellow light the dominant aspect of it. You can see some interesting roundabouts with the light in the anatomy of the arm, under the arm. We'll have, she's of course not as built, but she still has lats, she still has external obliques, and she still has the abdominals, which are coming down here. Do a little, got her hair up so we see her forehead, which gives her face a little more length. Very bright. This right here, and I can't remember the name of the tendon right now. I could look it up, but this is only people that are in very good shape, dancers, runners, will have this be so prominent. This one tendon that comes down here. We've got this space here. So, because I know a little bit about the anatomy of the leg, I know that if I put the muscles on this, there's the Sartorius muscle, which comes down from the upper hip and wraps around and comes to the inside of the knee. So that's part of the reason why you get that distinctive shape of the thigh there. Again, it comes around here and wraps up under the knee, so that gives you this shape because all these muscles are being held down by the Sartorius. So knowing where these muscles are becomes extremely handy. There's the quadriceps, part of the quadriceps. We've got one there, we've got one on the outside and one on the inside. And some other tendons and fascia and things like that. There's going to be certain muscles that really make the difference in whether your figure looks realistic or not, if you try to put them in the right place. There's a nice little cast shadow here. A nice little form shadow going along here. So it's a softer shadow. It gets a little harder when it goes around the bony parts of the knee. And you can almost see the other parts of the muscles coming in. She must be a dancer because she's got pretty defined legs. And very bony feet. And so dancers get really funny looking feet. This hand is way off in the distance, so it's going to be smaller and less defined. So even if it's not super obvious when you're drawing it especially from a photograph, you can exaggerate it a little bit to make that look more like it's moving away from you. In fact, I'm going to make it a little smaller and accentuate the fact that her arm is back. Here's her deltoid. There's her biceps. There's her elbow there. Nice little epicondyle over the wrist. And then a hand. And you don't have to put too much detail in the hand. You just have to indicate where. Here's the thumb part. There's a finger there. And then there's overlap. You can see pretty clearly that overlap of the wrist. Down here to the epicondyle. Looking for the core shadow all along this area. And then she doesn't have bingo arms. No siree.